Hi everyone, this is Kelly and I'm here because I wanted to talk a little bit about my current project, which is just exciting me to no end. I am currently working on a deck that could be named Kelly's Ultimate Mashup Cartomancy Deck. But that's a bit of a mouthful, so that's not what I'm calling it. The idea came from, so a while back, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably might recognize this. This is a deck that I made, and I think I have a video on this somewhere, I can't remember. But I took a deck of playing cards and aged it, and you can see it looks like hope is written in dust. And the concept was that you could be going into a house, and during the apocalypse, because that's what you do, you go into houses to search for food, and you see this deck sitting on the table with the word hope in the dust, right? And the idea, I used sandpaper and some stencils, and I made somebody had found a deck of cards, made a Lenormand deck for themselves, and this is all they needed, because a mice is a mice is a mice, a ship is a ship is a ship, right? It doesn't matter about the image. So somebody had made this, and I kind of aged it and that kind of thing, and that was the idea, was that you would find this in a house like after some end of the world scenario had happened, right? Then a little while back, I had made a video that was showing all of the decks that, like, I was trying to condense my decks into the decks that I would need now, taking into account personal but also all of my professional readings and the decks that I use for specific readings, and not having to take any of my readings off the table. Like, what were the decks that I would need? I'll put a link to that below. And at the end of it, I said, and I had got it down to, I don't know, like 12 or 14 decks, and at the end of it I said, now if it was a real go bag, like, apocalypse was happening and I had to simply grab things to put into my bag, I would take 2 decks. Well, I would take probably the Hermes playing card Oracle, which is in a nice little tuck box. That would be the only thing that would make it win out over the maybe Lenormand, because both of those are 52 card decks with Lenormand plus extra fortune telling cards, symbols from around the same time period, or certainly from the 1800s. But then I would also need to take another tarot deck, like a small, I have Tarot kind of playing cards, the Marshmallow Marseille, that are playing card size. So I would have to take both of those decks, and then I would have Cartomancy playing cards. Lenormand, I would also have an extended fortune-telling card deck, because there's symbols on all of the cards. And then, of course, with the tarot deck, I would have tarot. So I was like, that's a great, those 2 decks would do it. And if it was perfect, those things would be mashed together. That's kind of how I ended the video. And that's what started all of this, because then I was like, that is my perfect deck. Like, if I had a deck with all of those things combined together, bam. And I did first start think apocalypse, because I was coming from this, but then I quickly shifted gears to a short story I had started years ago that was about a lighthouse. Now, if you know me, you know I do believe in past lives quite strongly, and I actually have quite a lot of past life memories. And I believe that the beginning of the short story was more of a past life memory than anything. But anyways, my point is that has always, I never finished it, but that the story, or the echo of a story has always appealed to me, to come back to that. And so that's where then this deck came into being. So the concept is, of course, I immediately go into this mode, right? No, there we go. I thought felt like I was a little more constrained than normal. I of course always go to this kind of thing where I'm going to graph things out. And so I have, from teaching playing card divination, I had this chart here with my aces through my kings, the different suits, what the different suits stand for in playing card divination, my numbers, both positive and negative or light and shadow versions of each of the numbers, as well as the suits, and of course those that correlate with tarot. And so I decided to first start by taking the Lenormand cards, which, if you know Lenormand, are associated with playing cards. So, but from my perspective, my personal belief is that those associations are random. That they're the Earl of Norman, which you can purchase, still get a purchase of that deck. It's sold as sort of this one-stop shop. All of the German playing card games, all of the French playing card games, you get to play this board game type game called the Game of Hope. And when you're done, you can go ahead and do some oracle readings for your friends, right? And so, as far as I can tell, as far as my personal, where I land on it, is that those playing card associations don't actually match up with the Lenormand meaning. So the first thing that I did, which this is not going to be a deck for Lenormand purists, it's a mashup deck, right? If you can't roll with the mashing up, this probably wouldn't be the deck for you anyways. But I took the Lenormand cards and moved them where I would see them fitting in with playing card divination. So I did that first. Of course, that was that's 36 cards, but we have a 52 card deck. Plus we needed, because it's going to be tarot as well, I needed to add the pages in. So I have the page, jack, queen, and king. So so I have 56 cards, so I ended up having 20 cards that I needed to fill in with fortune telling cards that I could kind of start to build around the theme of the premise of the deck, which is that you come into an old lighthouse and you walk in and you see on the table a travel writing desk, as you would find from the 1800s, and inside a little container at the front of the desk you find a deck of hand-drawn cards, as well as a journal. And the first entry of the journal being in June of 1861. And so each of the entries of the guidebook are going to be in a journal format. And so the premise is that. So I wanted to pull in some of those themes, like lighthouses and weather vanes and foghorns and things of that nature as well. But I also wanted there to be some degree of continuity between the from ace to the kings. And so I wanted that to go in, and then I wanted it to at least not clash terribly with tarot, although you would probably be, I haven't been, we'll talk about that in a minute, I haven't been, but you may be just either only looking at it in terms of tarot, only pulling out the Lenormand cards, or only pulling out the 56 card minors to do for that. But ideally, if you're embracing the mashup, you would be using them all together. And so I wanted there to be some degree of interaction between them, so at least they didn't clash. So that was like the fun work, right? You got to sit down and you got to do all that work of making sure everything is set to go. And I have another video on this. I have opened up my Patreon account to really be able to put journal entries, sketches, and kind of keeping up on the different cards and all of that type of stuff. And so I did a very long video about this interesting process where I've just been compelled to collect these things that surround this, but I still needed a name. I was going off of the Hope Lenormand and thinking, okay, maybe it's going to be something about hope. But then my friend Bart had a brilliant idea that I should name it her, the main person in the story. I should name her something that means light, because she's a lighthouse keeper. Her father was a lighthouse keeper, and her mother. So it wouldn't be surprising that they would name their child something that means light. And when I was looking at different names that mean not light, one of those was my great-great-grandmother, who was Irish by way of Scotland. So she was born in Scotland, but in her teenage years, the family came to Ireland, and then eventually she married my great-great-grandfather, and the two of them came to America. And I have her ring here, which I used to wear. And I have her wedding ring here. And so Nellie was born. So and it sounds like a woman who would keep a lighthouse named Nellie. So anyways, Nellie was born, and the Nellie's Journal and Divination deck, or Nellie's Journal and deck, I don't know exactly, but it became the name of the deck. So I found the journal that looked the way the journal looked like in my eyes. I even pasted in, because I have terrible handwriting, so I pasted in a couple of the journal entries that are going to turn into the guidebook, just so I could see that and get that feel of it with her handwriting, which is not my handwriting, that is for sure. It's just been an absolute joy. It's been such a dive, not just into sketching, which is something I don't do a lot of and really didn't know whether I could do or not, and the story and the time period. I've found a couple really great books. Well, one really great book and one I've really enjoyed. But this is a book called Women Who Kept the Lights, an illustrated history of female lighthouse keepers. Now, this is just American lighthouse keepers, female lighthouse keepers. I'm still gathering in more things, but this has been such a treat. If you're interested in interesting women and lighthouses, I would highly recommend getting this. I'm still reading through it. Not long while I was in the process of drawing, I was looking for books to listen to about lighthouses, and I found this book. Now, I have the Audible version. Whenever I have the Audible version and I turn around and buy the physical version, that's an indication that I enjoyed it. Well, plus with this project, I wanted to have it. But it's called The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter by Hazel Gaynor. And this, I didn't know this when I was listening to it. I remember thinking, wow, because one of the main person's name is Grace Darling. And I thought, well, that's a little darling, right? Like, that's a little too cute or too sweet. Come to find out, it's her real name, and she is a historical person. Then come to find out that William Wordsworth Longfellow, who is one of my favorite poets, I did not make the immediate connection. It took a little bit of time. He wrote a poem about her. She was an English lighthouse keeper who became very famous, kind of in that kind of crazy degree of fame, to a degree that made her very uncomfortable after some rescue attempts some rescues that she did. But in particular, this one rescue, a ship had foundered, and her father had rowed out in the middle of a terrible storm because they were stranded on a rock and all of this kind of thing. And so it's based on, part of the book is based on a true story. And the author went to great lengths, and she talks about it in the back of this book, to be as accurate as possible. And we actually have quite a lot of things about her. And so I even collected some like she had these cards that became really popular, and so they, you know, would had this done of her, and then she would sign the cards. People were getting tickets to go around the island where the lighthouse was to kind of catch a glimpse of her. It was just really interesting phenomenon. But I didn't even connect the fact that William Wadsworth Longfellow also had written a poem about Grace Darling called Grace Darling, which I have read before, but I never made that connection. So that was pretty cool. So I listened to this great narrator. I really enjoyed it. Very sad. This is not a happily ever I mean, it has happily ever after components, but it is really difficult, and it's a powerful connection between mothers and children and loss, and mothers and daughters, and all kinds of stuff. Like, it was much more powerful than I expected it to be. I'm definitely going to be rereading it. So in here, so at the same time I was listening to this, and then I started, you know, I heard about Grace Darling, and I heard about Ida Lewis, who was actually an American woman who saved, I mean, she was a lighthouse keeper. She started saving people at the age of 12, and she racked up quite a lot, differing depending on if you're looking at exact records versus what people have said that she did, but an incredible amount of people that she has saved. And it just went from being a story that was the premise of, obviously, the deck, to just a fantastic dive into these amazing women. And this actually starts it chronological. The book itself, I think, does 28. 28 women, starting from Hannah Thomas was the first one from 1776, when her husband had to leave for a long time during the War for Independence, and she went through such interesting things that she went through as she was keeping the lights. And then I'm hoping that I can find something more specific about Ida Lewis, because she has just been absolutely fascinating. And so many of these women, you're able to read snippets of their letters people wrote about them, and it's just fascinating. The strength, like physical strength, endurance strength, internal strength in terms of isolation, just really fantastic. So this has been a fantastic dive into it as well. I know I'm really rambling at this point. Deep dive as I do. So then I ended up getting as I put up on Instagram, and of course have had people asking me questions, I did a test copy of just a text version of the deck with a couple images. I have 20, I think as of today I have 23 images done. I'll pop in here and put images as of today, just so that you can see where they're going. I did print some out myself. This is a printout. I did a couple that I had at the time. So it is going to, obviously the Lenormand part, where all of the images are going to be as if she has sketched them out herself, both in her sketchbook, but she's actually creating this deck. So as you read her journal entries, she's writing about the cards, and how she chose to depict them and what they mean. And so the guidebook will be in the form of her actual journal. And so these are other ones. Of course, there are going to be overlaps, where as in there is a tower card in Lenormand, and there is also the tower, which is very different energy. And so those work out fine. I definitely didn't want there to be male or female, so I kept my significant and querent, and just kept, my friend Patrick had a fantastic idea just to have unfinished sketches so that gender wouldn't even come into into play. So I love that. Thank you to great friends. My friend Bart actually hand sketched out the back of it when I was like, yeah, we would looked at some 19th century decks, but she would have had to been sketching it herself. So I knew it would have to be something like this. And he sketched it out, and then I changed the color to be sort of a pinkish. This is just printed on my printer. This is turned out this way on the first print run. I'm going to try to damp down the color a little bit. My idea for this deck is not that it is ragged. It has been sitting nicely in a box in a lighthouse, and so it shouldn't be destroyed, but at the same time it certainly would have been aged. Let me put that away, put that over here, put these neatly back. So these are as I go, as I do a few of them, I tend to print them out just so I can see them. Do I like the line weights, that type of thing, but they stay here where Miss Nellie would have kept them nice and neat. So I had to first sketch out the, obviously you're going to have the 4 suits of clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds. So yeah, I know this is a bad desk for trying to show it like this, but there we go. Maybe we'll get them to stay right at the end here. Obviously these are just a text for them, but it allows me to use it and do some readings with it, which has been a lot of fun. I still have some replacements because I actually forgot the priestess card and a couple, and I changed a couple, so those are still coming, but I can still use it as it is. You'll have your spades, your diamonds, your hearts, your clubs, your wands, your cups, your coins, your swords at the bottom, and then I made a key symbol for the major arcana. Has a key suit of keys for the major arcana, is how those are. And what I really like how it turned out was I used all different textures and colored papers or paper layers to create the deck. So when you fan it out, you do see that variation, which is really neat. I didn't do this I was not doing this in any particular color pattern, but the bear ended up, I just drew the bear today, and I really like how it turned out on one of the dark ones. But yeah, so I really love how that turned out as well. So it's been a lot. It's been a joy. Again, I'm about 23 cards in. I have many to go, but I am so enjoying it. I'm doing it. It's bridge size. I'm so excited. I know this is like the worst thing ever, but all this is a little bit of an introduction. I've put a couple pictures up on Instagram. I've definitely got some questions as to, what is this? Is this a finished deck? No, it is a deck I am currently working on. And even with the 78 cards, this is the same. If you have my Oracle deck, this is the same card stock. And what I love is that even being small, because it's bridge size, it riffle shuffles really great. So that's of course a huge bonus for me. So yep, so this is what I have been working on. Again, I already will have stuck in there. There's the priestess card that I have to I've got a second one coming in because I forgot, but I wanted to be able to at least do test runs. But I mean, this doesn't show you anything obviously because it's just words, but you don't need images, right? The lily's the lily, the lily. The tower's the tower's the tower. It doesn't matter. And so I can't wait. I have 2 that I've changed, plus I had forgotten to order that one. And once those come in, I'm actually going to start doing readings with it because that allows me to really work with the system or the mashup systems while I'm doing all of the drawings. So that's what I have been up to. I have really dove deep, deep end into the whole process, and it has been just a real joy. It's been a lot of fun, and pushing me artistically, because I don't draw, or I haven't drawn other than light sketches, like for watercolors and things like that. And so it's been a stretch for me artistically, but it's also, you know, just the story of it has all been such a amazing experience up to this far, and obviously I'm not even done. So yeah, I hope that this has been of some interest to you in seeing what I've been up to. Obviously, it will continue to go. Well, obviously, as I get more test decks, like with images and things, I'll be talking about it more. But that's why you're going to see a lot of this across Instagram and stuff, because I tend to be a deep diver into whatever it is that I am currently focused on, and this is what I am currently focused on. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will talk to you all later.